Hello everyone, greetings for the day. Welcome back to another tutorial on ISTQB Foundation examination. We are at chapter 5 and we are looking at the next topic, that is test planning and estimation, which is 5.2. So here most of the things remain common from chapter 1 and we have already discussed a bit about those topics. So here we'll be getting into a little more depth of those topics what we have covered from chapter 1. So if you see, the test planning and estimation was one of the topic which was not detailed in chapter 1. So we just had a basic understanding on these things. But at this point of time, the ISTQB standards would like you to know something more with an example or template to understand that what could be the test planning and estimation in more detail. But when you look at the estimation, it is further not elaborated because it is a responsibility of the test manager to do the test estimation. But here they will be giving you a basic idea on how the estimations can be done and some limited topics on discussion with respect to that. So anyways, these are requiring a very detailed information to basically do an estimation, but I cannot assure you that once you go through the estimation concept here in this tutorial, it can allow you to do the estimation because it is still foundation and we have not providing you any kind of basic input or beyond that on estimation as well. So let's quickly get started. We are talking about the test planning activities here, where we have been through about all these activities earlier in chapter 1, but let's look at it once more and understand that what exactly the test planning activities are. Test planning is one of the major role of a test manager within the organization to plan that entire test life cycle and define such activities like determining the entire scope and risk and identifying the objective of testing, defining the overall approach of testing, that what will happen, how, when, where, who will do it, and so on. Integrating and coordinating testing activities into the software life cycle. It is also about coordinating with the project managers or the product owners to coordinate the testing activities and aligning them with the other activities of the development model, so that we can be sure about that how we are available at that point of time when we really have the availability of the code to test it. So we just make sure that we are aligned with the other schedules of the project when it comes to testing. Making decisions about what to test, obviously deciding on what will be tested because we have limited time allocated for testing and we need to be quite wise enough to take a decision on what would be tested and what would be carried forward for further executions, or maybe it can be covered in the upcoming updates or upgrades of the application, but we won't be targeting here at this point of time. We'll be talking in more detail about this in the advanced level, so really don't worry to explore it beyond this. But yes, there are a lot of decisions are made at this point of time about what to test, what not to test. Also, another thing is to understand that scheduling the test activities, assigning resources for the activities is also a part of test planning, where we decide that what activities of the fundamental test process would begin when, like defining a start date and end date, or defining the entry criteria and exit criteria for the entire life cycle, as well as the levels comes as a part of it. Assigning the resources, obviously defining that number of people who will be working on that and who will be doing what type of level execution is also defined here in the test planning. Selecting matrices for monitoring and controlling is selected here. The matrices, what we have learned earlier, we will be elaborating in the next tutorial also, that what are the matrices we are talking about will be selected by the test manager during test planning to be used at relevant point of time between the fixed interval when these matrices are measured to track the progress on the project and obviously to take the control actions. So the control actions will also be defined, and these are in nutshell the major activities being conducted as a part of test planning, where the test manager takes the call of doing such activities. Following that, we are elaborating some of the inputs from the test planning, like entry criteria. So entry criteria is a checklist which basically consists of certain activities which are evaluated to assure that you can begin with the test process, or when we can start the test progress or testing process is what entry criteria evaluates. So here is a template which we can have a look on, which says an example of like availability of the testable requirement or models, which would be part of the entry criteria. Availability of the test item that have met the exit criteria for any prior test levels. For example, some of the exit criteria of a particular level can become an entry criteria to the next level. For example, exit criteria of unit testing. Like if this module is unit tested, it becomes an entry criteria for integration testing, which would be really mandatory to have such things. So you can also include such inputs as a part of the entry criteria for a different level and call it as an exit criteria for the previous level. Availability of the test environment is another aspect which we can have it. Availability of the necessary test tools, including the test data, and we have many more things which we can talk about. But obviously, these are some of the typical things which we include as a part of it. And also, to a certain extent, I can say the independence of the test team can also be a part of the entry criteria, which can say that how independent the testing team and whether this, say for example, when you talk about unit testing are generally performed by the developers, and we talk about the defining the degree of independence being the low or the lowest, that the developers itself will be testing the code for unit testing. But when it comes to system testing, we prefer to have a higher degree of independence. So this is where the degree of independence comes into consideration when you define entry criteria. And so moving to the next one is the exit criteria, where exit criteria would mainly check on the calling of the testing activities. So exit criteria, if fulfilled and evaluated, it basically says that we can stop testing now. Now, to decide on that, we have several parameters to be evaluated, and it's not an easy task for a test manager to take a call on the evaluation of exit criteria, because there are always a lot of such activities which remain unconducted or unanswered at that point of time, and test manager can take a call even at that point of time to tweak the exit criteria. Maybe it can be positive or negative. When you say positive, that means we have enough time and we can continue testing, then we can change the exit criteria and continue further. Subjected, the criterias or the targets or the threshold what you have defined during the planning are not met. In case sometime you run out of budget, you run out of time, you again can update your exit criteria and stop testing before the schedule basically gets complete for your testing. So we really don't want to see such unfortunate situations where a project is suspended just because you ran out of budget and you could not provide that coverage on the project before you could deliver it. So we try to always do a proper estimation, and then the test manager is held responsible for doing such activities so that we can provide the best within the given limited time and have those strong exit criteria which would help you to measure such things. So you can have a look on the typical exit criteria here, like what like plan tests have been executed, are we yet to execute some of them, or we are done with it. The defined level of coverage, like what coverage we are supposed to achieve and what we have achieved as of now. The number of unresolved defects is within an agreed limit. Like it's not mandatory that you fix all the defects at that point of time, but subjected the client has approved a limit for you, the threshold that, okay, even if the 90% defects are fixed, then we can accept the software. The number of estimated remaining defects is sufficiently low. Remaining defects in the sense that you target an area and you say that typically we find with an estimate of like defect identification rate or number of defects expected in a particular module, you say 10, and you could only find 5 of them, then again you measure such things as a part of it. And beyond that, your cost, time, budget, all those things are at a part of exit criteria, including the non-functional parameters which could be a part of your SLA, the service level agreement to be evaluated by the client. Now, when we come to the test estimation, it's not just this what you see on the screen. It is a very big story, and we can talk for almost the entire day on test estimation with like somewhere around at least 7 to 8 hours we can talk on test estimation to explain it. But in a very simple way, they are just trying to convey you at the foundation level that you just need to know what the estimation is all about, which basically is to estimate or answer the question, how much testing is enough? When you say exhaustive testing is impossible, you basically say that we cannot conduct all possible combinations of inputs and test the application, which is unrealistic. So what do? Then we have a question like, then how much testing would be enough to get the confidence or deliver the product being defect-free at this point of time? Then you just have some estimations which are being done, and you define the proportionality of the test cases to be executed for such features, including some parameters like the risk involvement, the complexity, the team skills, and the resource available, and a lot many other things. And you always allocate 3 parameters for each estimated activity, which is called as the time, the cost, and the effort. Where time is how much time we can allocate to that activity, the cost means the budget to be allocated for that activity, and obviously the effort, which comes in the terms of the manpower, the resources to be utilized. So here we are just having an understanding on the 2 techniques, what we can use, which is on a broader level to just classify that we have got different techniques to do estimation. One is the matrix based, where you have some certain evaluation and calculation which can be done as a part of it, whereas the other one is expert based, where it only depends on the past experience of the test managers and the senior resources of the organization from the testing perspective. So we have several other techniques and details when it comes to the advanced level of the ISTQB certification, where we can talk about it in more detail. Just to add more to it, the testing effort may depend on a number of factors, which include some of them like characteristics of the product, characteristics of the development process in use, and the outcome of testing, where we say that these are some of the factors which basically define how efforts can be allocated to the activities which are being conducted. So obviously, the product characteristics, the development process characteristics, because it is different for a traditional approach and compared to the agile process. And obviously the outcome of testing, that what is that you are going to finally validate when you are testing this product. So what is the scope of testing is what you measure. So from the test estimation, we just have this information. So we need to keep it limited, but they can just expect a general understanding on what exactly the test estimation is all about. The next and the last topic of this segment in this chapter is the test strategy. Remember, from chapter 1, we have already understood that what exactly the documents hierarchy is, where we start with the test policy, which is an organization-specific document, and the test strategy is a project-specific document, which is specifically or uniquely created for each project. And we also have a principle which speaks about this, that is, testing is context-dependent. That means you cannot test 2 different projects with the same approach or strategy. So strategy and approach are same, and we have unique strategies for each type of different unique projects. So here, if you see, we have 7 standard strategies. I have 3 of them on this slide right now, and we'll be looking at the other 4 in the next one. So the first one is analytical, which you also know it as risk-based testing, which can help you to implement risk-based testing within your project and evaluate or do risk analysis and collect that report to help you identify the potential risk areas or the risk itself, and then you can proportionally distribute the number of test cases to cover such risk areas. The second one is model-based test strategy, where the tests are designed based on some models. Like when you talk about the business model, you talk about the UML diagrams, the control flow diagrams, which we basically derive the requirements from. And it is generally recommended where the requirements are frequently changing, and it basically helps you to improve more on that side. Methodical approach is another approach which basically helps with the predefined set of test or test conditions, where you can talk about the TDD and BDD approaches, test-driven development, behavior-driven development, where predefined test cases are being used as a reference for the deriving or writing the code. So these are another one. So what I wanted to make sure here at this point of time, they are not going to elaborate anything on the strategy, that how it is applied and what it is. They can mainly ask you that this is one of the techniques or one of the strategies which can be used, or what exactly this is all about. So just keep an eye on that, like, having an understanding at K2 level that what is this, the name of the strategy and what is it all about. That's all. We are not supposed to apply it. We are not going to deal with such things at foundation level, but we'll be exploring that in the advanced level. The other 4 here we have got is the the process compliant or standard compliant, for more on the safety critical type of applications when we have human lives involved. Even when you talk about dealing with the banking applications where a lot of money is involved, you do deal with such standard and process compliant, which are more important compared to any other thing. The other one is directed or consultative. This type of strategy is generally driven by the advice and guidance of the experts, or maybe the stakeholders' instructions. So generally, when you talk about agile, again, is one of the way where you implement directive or consultative test strategy, which is like having a contribution from every individual stakeholder to contribute to form the user stories, and then you can use those user stories to further break them into tasks and then derive the test cases out of it. So if you look at each approach, they have got a different perception and have got some kind of uniqueness which could be different from different perspective, or from the perspective of dealing with a unique project. Regression averse, where we have more of regression compared to what we do today. For example, when you talk about the operating systems, when you release an operating system, we have executed certain number of test cases, but we will have an approach which requires a lot of regression testing, because we'll be dealing with a lot of updates frequently and make sure that regressions are being conducted to make sure that everything is fine. So that's one of the approach again. And reactive, which is obviously to make sure that the pre-planned things like preceding strategies, or like having a reactive component, that how the system basically works and how does it not, what it should not do. So we not only work on the positive side, we also work on the negative side of that, where we can look into those things. So putting it all together, we have 7 specific strategies or approaches. Within a project, either you can use standalone one of these techniques, or you can also combine some of the approaches and call it as a blended test strategy to be used as one of the strategy for the project. So either you can use them as standalone, or you can combine them to add more value and weightage to the process. So that's from the segment 2, test planning and estimation, which would give you a better idea on understanding these things. And we'll be looking ahead for the next topic in the upcoming tutorial. So stay tuned on the more updates on this chapter. So till then, keep watching. This is all for now. We have more videos coming up on the upcoming tutorials and also on the upcoming chapters of this tutorial. So stay tuned for more videos. Do hit the bell icon for getting notified about the latest videos. And in case you have not subscribed to the channel, please do subscribe as early as possible, because we'll be having more videos about technologies and testing coming up back after this, right after this. So stay tuned, and till then, enjoy learning. Happy learning. Take care.